Can you hear me? Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so very much for being here. We're going to try to be really respectful of time and get through as much material as we can. Thank you very much for coming to our town hall on gun safety and community safety. As many of you know, my name's Amy Wallen. I'm Kirkland's mayor, and I'm joined on stage by every member of the Kirkland City Council. Tonight this is a really important topic for us. So we have Deputy Mayor Jay Arnold, Councilmember Dave Asher, Councilmember Tom Neir, Councilmember Toby Nixon, Councilmember John Pascal, and Councilmember Penny Sweet. We have a lot of people tonight. Really happy to see you all and a lot to talk about, so we're going to get right into the program. Before we do, I'm going to mention just a few quick points. First, thank you to the Lake Washington School District and the high school for the use of this beautiful facility. We also want to thank our city staff, volunteers, police and fire for putting the event together, including the great food and the information presented outside. And of course, we send a big thank you to you. Thank you for being here, for your energy, enthusiasm, and commitment to making Kirkland such a wonderful place to live, work, play, and raise a family. In terms of logistics tonight, bathrooms are located just outside the theater in the front lobby. Please note that the city is videotaping this event. That's me. Can you turn my phone off? Sorry. It's my husband's ring, yes. And we will make that video available on the city website within the next few days. As you know, we have the theater for 2 hours, so we're hoping to wrap things up by 8. The rules and guidance for this evening are very similar. We're doing it kind of like items from the audience at a council meeting. So each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak, and we're doing this so we can get as many people as possible through. When you have 30 seconds remaining, you'll see your light go from green to yellow. And when your time is up, the red light will come on, and I'll ask you to promptly finish your thought when you see the red light. Council won't be answering questions or taking comments after each speaker. We just want to make sure as many speakers get through as possible so we can hear from as many people as possible and hear all your views. However, at the end of the night, the council members, should they wish, will have an opportunity to make a comment after they hear from all of you. We've asked the city attorney to make a presentation to start the agenda, and we've asked our city manager, Kurt Triplett, our city attorney, Kevin Raymond, who you'll hear from in just a moment, and our police chief, Sherri Harris, to join us on the stage during the course of the evening, and they'll be here to answer any technical questions or issues about the law or city policy if you have those. But please know the answers will be brief, again, so that we can get as many people up to the mic as possible. City staff will be presenting a report of tonight's feedback at the City Council meeting on July the 17th. That report will be available online on July 13th at the city's website as part of our City Council agenda packet. And we'll be using the feedback from tonight as we consider options for our city budget initiatives, the city's state legislative agenda, and possible changes to our ordinances and policies in the city. For those of you who'd like to speak this evening but don't get the chance, we've also provided a community feedback form in your packet, and that form provides a space for people to write, text, or email questions or comments directly to city staff. Please note that all these communications, as always, are a part of the public domain and are subject to public records requests. We also understand that many of you might not have all the information you need to help the council make an informed decision on this topic. Please use that form to write, text, or email us what specific information you'd like to have, and we will get that to you as best we can and as quickly as we can. We're also going to be pushing information out on our website, social media, newsletter, and all the other ways that the city tries to stay in touch with you. Finally, please know that there are many other ways that you can engage with our staff and provide feedback for the report. For example, over the next 2 weeks, our staff is scheduling additional focus groups, community meetings, and individual interviews. If you write, text, or email us with your interest and availability to participate in any of these activities, we will follow up and schedule your participation. So for tonight's agenda, the council is interested in getting all of your views on gun safety and community safety, and we've organized the evening around 4 categories: state and local legislation on firearm safety, improved enforcement of existing laws and regulations, education and training programs to support responsible firearm ownership, and mental health and support initiatives. Everyone that intends to speak should have already filled out a card and submitted it based on one of these topic areas. If you haven't filled out a card yet, they're available outside in the lobby. There's my other phone ringing. I'm so sorry. Thanks, Sherri. During the course of the evening, we'll randomly select cards from each category. So that's our plan to kind of get things moving. If your name's called, we ask that you form a line behind one of the 2 microphones. And as we noted earlier, please keep your comments to 2 minutes. When you see the red light, I'm going to ask you to stop speaking, just so that we can hear from as many people as possible. And if at the end we have more time, we'll use that time to hear from more people. During the course of the evening, we'll also be using instant polling technology. Everyone should have this thing that we are calling the Votatron. Every 10 or 15 minutes, Deputy Mayor Arnold and I will be asking questions related to one of those 4 topics. And using this technology, you'll have the chance to answer those questions, and your answers will be recorded. The answers are anonymous, so you can feel free to say whatever you feel. And the results will show up immediately on the screen, so you'll know how the room feels. Toward the end of the evening, after we take public comment, the council will be given about 30 minutes to respond to comments, questions, or concerns. So tonight, we want to test these little things out. So please turn your attention to the question posed on the screen behind me that reads, the Seattle Mariners are the most exciting team in Major League Baseball so far in the 2018 season. Using your handheld device, please press 1 if you agree and 2 if you disagree, or 3, baseball, no thanks, if you're not much of a baseball fan. My notes here say, hopefully it works. Hopefully it works. Yeah, okay. I thought so. Great. All right, we're going to ask you a few more questions to test out this technology and also get to know each other a little bit. In which part of Kirkland do you reside? So, if you're from any of these neighborhoods, go ahead and press which neighborhood you're from. Okay. North Kirkland. Way to show up. Okay. The next question is, how did you hear about tonight's event? So if you could answer that question from us. Because I know that I hope you've heard about it several ways. We use Twitter, email, we've posted signs, we've had it out in newsletters, we've had it on Be Neighborly Kirkland. We've tried to do a really good job of getting the message out. Sorry? Oh, there we go. 29% word of mouth. Interesting. I wonder what the others mean. We'll catch up with you later about that. Okay, and then our next question is, do you have children or grandchildren aged? What do I need to do? Yeah, let's go. Okay. Great. Thank you for being here, parents of all ages, family members of all ages. Lastly, we're going to put up a question that's pretty topical for tonight, and that is, what is your familiarity with firearms? So please answer one of these questions. Okay. Well, thank you very much for participating, and this is going to come in handy. Finally, I want to say a couple things about expectations, and I'm almost done talking, I promise. This is a very complicated subject, and we don't expect to solve all the issues related to gun safety, obviously, and community safety this evening, but we do hope to accomplish at least 3 important things. First, we've entered the theater tonight as a community. We had a little barbecue outside. We had a few laughs about my phone going off. Anyway, and I'm very proud that we are one of the most engaged, active communities in the state of Washington, and I hear that all the time from communities around the state. So let's make sure we leave tonight as a community. Whatever happens tonight, please remember that our greatest strength is our ability to care for each other. If any group of people can help find a path to resolve gun safety and community safety issues, I believe in us. I believe in you. Second, please feel free to speak your mind. There will likely be some discussion about Second Amendment tonight, and that's a good thing. Let's also remember the power of the First Amendment. Whatever your views on these topics, you should feel free to let us know what you think. That's why the council's here tonight. That's why we have all our staff to really listen and to give you the opportunity to be heard by your peers in the community. And I really do think that this is helpful for that. And finally, if there is common ground discussed here tonight, let's recognize it and shine a light on it. Too often when addressing issues that seem entrenched and unsolvable, people overlook those things that we can all agree on. Sometimes it takes a lot of hard work to find those areas of common agreement, but I feel like that's what Kirkland's really good at. So the council's ready and willing to do the work. I feel like you all are, so let's get started. I'm going to welcome Kevin Raymond, our incredibly talented, handsome, smart. This guy has got it all. He's our city attorney, and I'm a huge fan.
Thank you, Mayor Wallen, and thank you all for being here. I think there was going to be a pulse question about who likes to hear lawyers talk, but they removed that, and it's just as well. I am going to speak briefly, really as a way of helping frame up the conversations that we're all going to be having tonight. I'm going to be going pretty briskly through 7 slides, addressing first the legal relationships between federal, state, and local laws. Second, a quick overview of existing federal and state gun safety laws. Third, the challenging issue of state preemption, particularly as it relates to what local governments can do in the area of gun safety. And then finally, a couple of slides to finish up with a survey of some of the things that local governments are doing in the area of gun safety and community safety, and some of the things that are being talked about statewide through either an initiative process or in Olympia. The gun law framework, federal, state, and local law. Mayor Wallen made reference to the Second Amendment, and it's always important to remember that at the federal level and at the state level, the right to bear arms is constitutionally protected. And at the federal level, that's guaranteed by the Second Amendment. Federal laws obviously have a national reach. We hear that federal laws are the supreme law of the land, and that really drives from the Supremacy Clause in Article 6 of the United States Constitution. Federal law doesn't preempt or prevent states from also regulating in this area, but the laws passed at the federal level are supreme, which, if you're a state, means that you can't pass a law that allows something that that Congress has prohibited. At the state level, and again, the right to bear arms is protected under our state constitution as well. Obviously, state laws have a statewide reach and not a national reach. They can have a preemptive effect, which means that in an area where the state legislature has preempted or occupied a field and been very clear about it, it can carefully prescribe what local governments can do. And that's one of the challenges in the area of gun safety, is the preemptive effect of state laws that have been passed, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. And then finally, local laws. And those are the laws that local governments like the City of Kirkland could enact that don't purport to allow something that federal law prohibits and that aren't specifically preempted by a state law. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. A quick survey of existing federal gun laws, and this just is designed to sort of give a feel for what's been passed by Congress and is the supreme law of the land. First, if you're a gun shop, in the United States, you have to have a license that's issued by the federal government. There are a number of individuals under federal law that are not allowed to have guns. For example, individuals that have been convicted of felonies or domestic violence crimes, people who have been determined to be mentally incompetent or who have been involuntarily committed. If you're a fugitive from justice, you're not supposed to have a gun. There are other categories of individuals that under federal law are not allowed to have guns. Similarly, if you've been the subject of a restraining order for a domestic violence related set of issues, you're not allowed under federal law to possess a firearm either. There are some limits on the possession of firearms by minors and the transfer or sale of firearms to them, but they're somewhat limited. And parent intervention can make a difference in that regard. This is a gun-free zone, and that's the result of federal law. And similarly, federal facilities are places where if you're not a commissioned police officer, you're not allowed to have a gun. Finally, background checks, and this is what we all have come to refer to as the Brady Law. That requires background checks related to the commercial sale of firearms, and it's sort of put together by the federal government through a national database system that it operates in concert with local law enforcement, state law enforcement. All of these laws are criminal in nature and include both the possibility of prison and monetary penalties. So turning to state law, Washington is an open carry state, which means that if you have a permit for a gun, you can carry a gun, whether it's a pistol or a rifle, openly. And a lot of people don't know that, but we're an open carry state. If you have a concealed weapon, you're required to have a concealed pistol permit. A lot of the limitations on who can have guns under state law are similar to those in federal law, but there are some additional categories under Washington law that I want to just quickly mention as examples. One, if you've been convicted, if you've been found to be not guilty by reason of insanity, you can't have a firearm. If you're awaiting trial for a serious offense, or you've been convicted of various other crimes like stalking, reckless endangerment, or if you're the subject of a restraining order in the domestic violence area or sexual assault, harassment, those types of things. There's a brand new tool in the state of Washington called extreme risk protection orders, and I think the City of Kirkland Police Department has exercised its authority under that new law twice, and it basically allows families and law enforcement agencies to go to a court and ask the court to temporarily at least take firearms away from individuals that a court concludes are at an extreme risk of hurting themselves or others. And that's a tool. Finally, there are dealer licensing and background checks that are required in Washington too, and they're actually broader than are provided for under federal law. Under Washington law, the background checks apply to the private sale of firearms in addition to the commercial sale of firearms, and that's not provided for under the Brady Law. And like the federal laws, these are, in Washington, are criminal statutes, and they provide for the possibility of jail time and monetary penalties as well. So the sticky issue of state preemption, I'm not going to read the whole statute, but the key here is that our legislature by law has said that the state of Washington fully occupies and preempts the entire field of firearms regulations. And cities may enact only those laws and ordinances relating to firearms that are specifically authorized by state law. So it's very prescriptive, it's very broad, but some cities have determined that there's a little bit of wiggle room in there when a gun safety law is focused not on the regulation of firearms, but on gun safety, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I just want to sort of footnote that for you as you have conversations together tonight. As I mentioned, even though the state of Washington has largely preempted the field of firearms regulation, they have articulated some narrow exceptions related to firearms regulations where local governments can still act. And I'm going to mention three of them here. The first is the right, the ability to regulate the discharge of guns in cities where a legislative body has reasonably concluded that the discharge of firearms presents a risk to persons, to property, and to domestic animals. That's number one. The second, local governments can regulate where the commercial sale of guns happens, and they can make sure that those are at least 500 feet away from primary and secondary schools. And finally, there are several different statutes in different contexts, including the commission of felonies and violation of controlled substances laws that provide for the seizure and the forfeiture and the destruction of guns, which is something that our Kirkland Police Department already does. So what are some of the things that local governments are doing or have done in the area of gun safety, notwithstanding the preemption challenges that I've mentioned? We just talked about two: banning the discharge of guns, limiting the commercial sale and proximity to school. The city of Seattle put a tax on gun sales and ammunition sales in the city of Seattle, and that case went all the way up to the Washington Supreme Court, which affirmed the ability of Seattle to impose that tax. So that's one thing that local governments have tried. We hear a lot about more police officers in schools, and that's something that many school districts and other jurisdictions have done. There are other programs that have been voluntary but have included incentives. Sometimes they've come in the form of subsidies from local governments. Sometimes they've come in the form of contributions from private entities. One set of examples relates to the safe storage of guns, and this is something that Seattle has done, that King County does through its Lock It Up project, and that Project Child Safe has also done. And I understand from what I've read in the newspapers that the city of Seattle is planning to do more in the area of safe storage. Second is gun buybacks. This was something that I know at least the city of Seattle did, and it used private contributions from companies to offer gift certificates, gift cards to individuals who wanted to turn in their guns. And then finally, this is something that's been tried in Seattle and is being done in Seattle and Edmonton and other cities around the country, including Philadelphia and Baltimore. Those come to mind, and that's requiring that individuals who have guns that lose their guns or have them stolen report those losses, so that the police can know they're out on the street and can be on the lookout for them, and so that they're less likely to be used in the commission of crimes by someone other than their owners. So those are some of the examples of things that, notwithstanding preemption, local governments are or have done around the state. Finally, I think this is my last slide. What's happening around the state? What kinds of conversations are happening in Olympia? One thing that is often said, and there's clearly merit to it, is there are a lot of gun laws on the books. Can we do a better job of enforcing the gun laws we already have? Another issue that people are talking about now is whether it would make sense to raise the age limits on the ownership of guns, whether it's a pistol or a rifle. Another example that's being talked about is whether we should require that gun owners go through some kind of safety course so that they know how to safely operate and store and maintain their firearms. Safe storage, we've talked about that. Enhanced criminal background checks for gun buyers, that's something that's being talked about. Some kind of a ban on semi-automatic weapons is something that we hear about from time to time. And then finally, and I want to finish with this, but also sort of acknowledge its significance, is around, and I've heard our police chief talk a lot about it, our city manager and our council as well, is what can we do that we're not doing around mental health to make sure that people that need help get it. So that if they also come into possession of firearms, they're less likely to use it in bad, harmful ways. So I'm going to stop there, and thank you for your time. I'll be up here with the chief and others, and at some point, if you have questions that call for a technical answer, Chief Harris or I will be available to help try to answer those. Thank you for your time.
We have a wonderful city attorney. So thank you, Kevin. Now we're going to take public comment, and we're going to do it basically as we do at the city council meeting. So the first topic is state and local legislation on firearm safety. Our staff has taken all the sign-up cards for the topic and has organized them according to those in favor of maintaining the current regulations or decreasing regulations on firearms, and those in favor of additional regulations on firearms. And basically, as we do for items from the audience at City Hall, we're doing, for proponents and opponents. So we're kind of modeling our system tonight on that. We're going to maintain that policy as best we could, given the town hall structure here tonight. And all the results and all of the comments will be compiled at the end so that those will be available to everyone. So we're going to draw 2 from each category. And if you hear your name, if you could make your way down to the microphones. And as I said, we'll get through all of the topics, and then at the end we'll try to have time for, make sure everybody has a time to speak. So, Jay.
Okay, so I've picked some names at random. 2 people in favor of more gun regulations, 2 people in favor of less or the same gun regulations. Could the following people make their way to the microphone? Michelle Alton Kaler in support of more gun regulations. Kelly Burr in support of less or the same. Jack Rogers in support of more gun regulations, and Brian Monser in support of less of the same.
That order, right? Okay, so Kathy Anderson is our city clerk, and she keeps time for us at City Hall with this green, yellow, red system. So Kathy, when it's yellow, you have 30 seconds, and red, it's time to stop. And then I'll be forced to interrupt you, and I'll try not to do that. But first, we're going to hear from Michelle Aten Keller. And I'm sorry, Michelle, if I did that wrong. Oh, over here.
So when my children were in preschool, one a preschool, one toddler, I worked to help pass the ban on assault weapons in our national legislature. We let that ban expire. We did it so that there would never be a Sandy Hook elementary school shooting. Of course, there was a Sandy Hook elementary school shooting, and there have been many school shootings since. It's time to get the ban on assault weapons back passed in Congress and do what we can at the state level as well.
Thank you, Michelle. So I love clapping. It's so lovely, but I think it will go quicker if we don't clap. It's just a thought. Okay. Kelly Burr? Kelly.
Yes, right here.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Burr. I wanted to come here and give you the perspective, because some of you don't know anyone who not only is a gun owner, but someone who actually carries one everywhere they go every day. I do. I bring my safe space with me wherever I go. My family is safe with me wherever I go. I train regularly. I am a very good shot. I am trained to handle under stress. I'm also trained as an emergency medic for trauma situations. But to give you guys the perspective, it's the individual responsibility, the empowerment. I don't have to wait. The response time for personal defense for my family is 2 seconds as opposed to 10 minutes. Here on the east side, we have amazing police departments, right? Redmond Police Department, Kirkland Police Department, Bellevue are fantastic. The response times are great. The service is great. I always have a great time interacting with them. But even a lot of the police officers that I do talk to also acknowledge that they respect the fact that and appreciate that, if I'm in a situation where I need to defend myself, where I need to defend my family, or where I need to provide assistance to defend someone else, I can do that at the drop of a hat. My concern with the existing gun laws are the number of places that I can't defend myself. I can't. In here, for example, I can't now that's not specifically state law, that's federal law, because this is a school, and that's not a comfortable feeling for someone who is used to being able to defend themselves wherever they go, and and limited to only hand-to-hand or other options. In here, for example, although we have a great police presence, so I'm not terribly concerned here today. As far as other things, like for example talk about the assault weapons or semi-automatic rifles, a key part of our state constitution is the individual citizen's right to defend not only themselves, but of the state. That actually means potential combat, potentially actually having to serve as a first and last line of defense function, and citizens will actually need effective weapons to be able to do that. I think that's all I have time for.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Okay. The next person is Jack Rogers. Welcome, Jack.
Hi, my name is Jack Rogers. I'm a former high school principal for 20 years and 10 years as an English teacher, and even did a stint in an alternative school in the metropolitan area. And I have been watching this discussion about arming teachers, and I want to state categorically that this is an enormously bad idea. Most teachers don't want to do it and probably will refuse to do it. Some can't be trained, and anybody who has a gun in the room is surely going to have it locked up. During a melee, there's hardly enough time for you to get to unlock a gun and get it out and use it. And once out in the hall with a gun in your hand, you are liable to be shot by the killer or by the guard, and it poses more problems than it can possibly ever solve. It seems to me that more guns in schools is not an idea so much as another way to sell more guns.
Thank you. Next speaker, Brian. Welcome, Brian. Brian Mounser, I think. Is it over here? Brian.
Over here?
Hi.
So, I guess my comments are in multiple categories, but I had to put my name in one. So, I'm an avid gun enthusiast, but I actually am in support of some reasonable controls, like more safe storage, but at home, and things like that. But I'm vehemently opposed to certain laws similar to, like, that target aspects of a weapon that don't affect its function. There's laws in California that they've passed for many years that target weapons with pistol grips, and it doesn't affect anything. I mean, law after law after law after law that gets proposed or even passed have no actual effect, and it perturbs me to no end to see a problem and everybody working for a solution, and then what actually gets passed are these useless laws. In California, it doesn't actually prevent you from owning an AR-15. You actually just swap the pistol grip with a thing that has a paddle on the back so that it works around the law. I don't think we should spend another dime on more restrictions for certain types of firearms because of the way they look, or the magazine capacities, or whether the magazine can come out easily without a tool. I think we should focus on like home storage. Like, we have great laws around trigger locks that is like child safety to make sure if somebody doesn't accidentally discharge it, but not so much to keep somebody from stealing it. I'm okay with those if they're proposed in a reasonable way.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. So now we're going to turn your attention to the topic of improved enforcement of existing laws and regulations.
And could the following speakers make their way to the microphone? David Bressler, Calvin Tanini, and Keith Ragusa.
Thank you. David Greshler. Welcome, David.
Thank you. I appreciate you all doing this tonight, and it's great to hear from both sides, by the way. Tonight's a beautiful night out there, and there's a lot of people in the parks. And what a lot of people might not realize is that I could go into that park, or anyone, holding a gun or holding a rifle, and it'd be in my right. It's what the city attorney talked about. And that's part of the open carry law. Now, that makes a lot of sense in some areas. I believe that. But in Kirkland, where we have density and a lot of people and we have these beautiful parks, it doesn't seem to make sense to me. Now, I know because of preemption, we have this sort of law at the state level that kind of stops us from being able to do something about this. But I would encourage the city to really think about ways to work with the legislature to find a way to maybe find sort of a good median on this, where I think everybody would, and I'd love to, by the way, hear from some of the people who talked about, their ownership of guns and so on, how they feel about this issue, because I think it might be a common ground issue. I don't think any of us really wants somebody walking with a rifle in Marina Park tonight, for a lot of reasons. So I would just encourage the city to really look at that issue and see if we can find a sort of a way to make it work so that the right context to having open carry makes sense, but in other situations, it wouldn't.
Thank you, David.
Yep.
Thank you for your comments. The next person is Calvin Tonini.
Hello, and thank you for all being here. I have a technical question if I can ask the city staff. Does the Kirkland Municipal Court handle petitions for protection orders? Because the handout that the city police give out is yes. When I went in person to check, the answer was no.
One moment, please. I'm phoning a friend.
So it depends on what type of protection order you have. If it's something that's related to domestic violence and you have children, often you have to go to Superior Court. So to some extent, it depends on what type of protection order that is.
Well, yes, but you can do the initial temporary application at municipal courts and then get transferred over to Superior Courts should a municipal court allow that.
Yeah, and all of that information is actually on the city website.
Right.
That it would direct you to which court you need to go to.
Right. Well,
for sure.
Sure. Anyways, so I mentioned this idea to David W. last week at the Other City event, and I think this is an idea that, and I believe from understanding is that the City of Kirkland courthouse does not handle petitions for protection orders, domestic violence, anti-harassment, extreme risk. If they do, that's great. But if not, I think that's a common ground win that we can all achieve here. I believe that people should not need to leave town to find protection from our courts, from whether it be domestic violence or from guns. I think Kirkland has a great setup. There's a courthouse and a police department right in one building, right by the local Fred Meyers. I think if we make it convenient and easy, I think it'll be a great win for community safety if people can seek help in form of protection orders here in the city. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Calvin. The next person is Keith Ragusa. Good evening. Welcome.
Real quick, just context, North Rose Hill. My sweetie's got 2 kids, LW, 1 graduate, one's currently a sophomore. Obviously, one of the hotter topics here is safety of the kids, but broader context, guns in general around the city. If we look back over the last, let's say 10 years of really bad things that have happened in schools, one of the things that we consistently see, the gun was the mechanism, true that, but we see kids, whether it was medical issues plus medication, parents and or communities who loved them but didn't keep them or their families accountable for their actions, recurring interactions with law enforcement, at state and federal in the case of Parkland, that was yet ineffective until, whether it's because of bullying, whether it's marginalization, whether it's whatever, these children act out. And again, they could do it with a car, a knife, a big rock, whatever. I get that there are some people very concerned about availability and things like that. That leads us to response time. Kirkland has done a phenomenal job by bringing officers into schools to bringing that response time down from 10 minutes to less than a minute. That is, without a doubt, the most effective way of solving things and would have solved a lot of the problems at Parkland. So, kudos to Kirkland and the surrounding areas in general. I think that we will always have a good, healthy debate about what is our individual rights, whether we choose to exercise them or not, and what are the rights of others in terms of when they can't, in essence, control themselves within our social norms and legal structures, and how they're dealt with by the law enforcement communities.
Thank you very much for your comments, Keith. Thank you. So those are the comments we received on the topic of improved enforcement of existing laws and regulations. Are we going to the Vototron?
We are going to the Vototron.
We're going to the Vototron, okay. The Kirkland City Council should increase police enforcement of gun laws by adding more community-based police officers. If you could answer that question for us, please. Everybody had a chance to vote? A little more time?
How do you define base? What does that mean? Is that different from a standing, is that different from a traffic cop? Is that a school cop? Is that...
So the question is, the Kirkland City Council should increase police enforcement of existing gun laws by adding more community-based police officers. So there's existing gun laws in our state that we could, as a city, engage more police officers and increase our force to go out and do more enforcement action. So I think that's the question.
So just to clarify, we do have patrol officers here in Kirkland, and we do have traffic officers. We have 2 school resource officers. Uh-oh, I might have just answered a question for later, but, uh-oh. But the question really is about officers that would be focused on not responding to just routine 911 calls, but actually working on gun-related crimes that often involve drugs and property crimes.
Okay, so I'll give you another few seconds to vote. Okay, I think we're ready. Okay, thank you very much. That will be helpful for us. Okay, we're now going to turn your attention to the topic of education and training programs to support responsible firearm ownership. And the deputy mayor is going to give me some cards.
On the topic of education and training programs to support responsible gun ownership, could Mike Wirt, Dave Griffin, and Paul Edward Morris make their way to the microphone?
Thank you. Okay, Mike, whenever you're ready, welcome.
Yeah, I'm over here.
You're over here. Hi, Mike.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I just want to iterate, I'm sure there's a lot of stories in this room right here with all the people that are around, but a few years ago, about 3 years ago, about 2:30 in the morning, I got woken up by some pretty heavy pounding on the door. My wife woke me up, because I slept through it, and had family in the house, and it was an intruder trying to get in the house very aggressively, putting his shoulder into the door, about busting it through. I looked outside, I saw he had a knife in his hands, and it was a pretty sizable one. And so, I went to my lockbox, retrieved my weapon, and having been trained, and I did not feel panic, I was pretty much at peace, knew what the routine was, and took a defensive position and waited for the police to arrive. My wife had called 911, police arrived in about 4 minutes. And as the saying goes, when seconds matter, the police are only a few minutes away. They did a wonderful job once they did arrive because the intruder did not get into the house before they were able to deal with the situation. So I just want to emphasize there is a time and place for being armed if you're trained. And, training is an important thing, and education is an important thing. Guns don't always have to be the first thing at hand. There's a lot of other alternatives that can be used as well. But for those who choose to be armed and are trained, I would support continued programs to help get that information across to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Mike. So next up is Dave Griffin. Welcome, Dave.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the police department and fire people for providing some wonderful hot dogs and food. That was a marvelous thing to do. Thank you very much. I was impressed with your polling, and what I picked up from that is the number of people who have never touched or been around a firearm. And when I think of education and training to support responsible firearm ownership, I also think that means those other members of our community, that parents, grandparents, teachers, firemen need to be familiar with firearms. And I really think that there are effective programs to make our children safer and other members of our community safer, that where you have unfamiliarity, you can have fear. let's get familiar and let's have and understand what those kids in school are taught about if you find a firearm, what to do, and how we should respond. And I think as a community, we should be approaching that. I think the state of Colorado has begun a program. There is the Eddie Eagle program for children to promote familiarity, and this doesn't mean you have to be an owner, but let's all be understanding of what's going on with guns in our community. And as you know, when the fire alarm goes off in a building like this, we have people who are responsible for getting kids out of schools and making sure they're safe. And I think the same applies to our community. Let's be safe and let's be responsible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for your comments. The next person we have is Paul Edward Morris. Good evening, Paul.
Well,
where
good
are you?
evening, Mayor.
Nice to see
My
you.
goodness sakes, this is an awesome forum. And thank you very much, Police Chief, for being here to represent the Kirkland Police Department. That's great. My name is Paul Morris. I am a certified medical assistant. I'm actively certified as an EMT, federally certified in emergency medical operations on the FEMA level. I am also a daddy of 4 kids who are grown up and a granddaddy of 2 little boys. So I'm very much into children and rearing them up. I also taught the Eddie Eagle program to the Washington State Patrol over at the Police Academy. They took hold of the program and they were going to teach it in their safety section in the patrol. And they did, and with much success. And by the way, let's get the attention of all the kids in this forum here. Let's review the 4 steps from Eddie Eagle here. It's if you see a gun, stop, don't touch, leave the area, and tell an adult. And I parentheses around that, a responsible adult. Does that make sense? Uber, yay. Let's take hold of that. Now, our police chief, do you support that kind of a 4-step program for teaching kids that if they see a gun, don't touch it, leave the area, and tell an adult?
So I actually taught my kids.
Uber, yay. So, same with me.
That video.
Great. I've been a concealed pistol licensee for 32 years now. I've never had it lapse. I have 4 alive kids today, and everywhere I went with those children, I had my handgun on my hip, and that handgun didn't just magically jump out of its holster and shoot people. I taught my kids the tools they needed to empower themselves. I'm not an enabler, I'm an empowerer. And anyone who knows me, I'm all for safety.
Thank you
and I think
so
we need to
much.
teach that in our schools.
Thank you so much for your comments. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Okay, we're back to the Votatron.
Okay, back to the Votatron. How many times in the past year, is this the one? Yes. Have you discussed a family member or acquaintance's firearm storage practices to ensure a safe environment for you, your family members, or friends? But he voted? Okay, let's go. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for answering that question. The Kirkland City Council should fund community-wide firearms safety education, which features school programs, safe firearms storage, and trigger locks. So this is another Votatron question for you. We good to go? I think we're good to go. Okay, thank you very much. Really helpful. Okay, we're going to turn your attention to the topic of mental health support and initiatives.
So we had one speaker sign up on mental health and support initiatives. Katie Barlang, could you make your way to the microphone? And then I've chosen 2 other people on the topic of improved enforcement of existing laws and regulations, since we only had the one on the mental health topic. Could Clint Finelli and Paul Tanner make their way to the microphones?
Thank you, Jay. Katie, whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm Katie Borlaug, and I'm kind of surprised I'm the only one who wanted to talk about mental health, but I suppose I wanted to because I actually am the Director of Community Outreach for Fairfax Behavioral Health right here in Kirkland. So there's two things I would really like to share with you all today. First is when we talk about gun violence, we're often thinking about violence on another person. But suicide is actually the second leading cause of death for Americans aged 10 to 34. And of those who commit suicide, firearms are the number one method of suicide is by firearm. I'll just leave you with that. Second is today, in today's media, we so often, I feel the media really tries to link violence with mental illness. But what I bet most people here do not know is that those with mental illness are more likely to be the victims of violence than the perpetrators of violence. And of the very, very small number of those with mental illness who are violent, there's research has very clearly shown that there's about 4 primary risk factors for that, and that is co-occurring abuse of drugs and alcohol, being also a past history of violence, as well as being young and male, and having untreated psychosis. Yet only 1/3 of Americans with a diagnosed mental illness seek treatment. And that is the number one way to prevent those who with serious mental illness, who have untreated mental illness, is through access. So we need greater awareness and access to mental health resources.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Next we have Clint Finelli?
Tannehill.
Oh, of course. I'm sorry.
Over here.
Thanks.
But hey,
And
thank
you're
you guys
there.
for being
Hi,
here,
Clint.
really. So a little bit of history on myself. I grew up in Spokane, Washington, and I grew up in a poor neighborhood. In that neighborhood, whenever the gun show came into town, everybody flocked to it because that was the one place where you can buy guns with no background check. No, there are kids there underage, 17, 16-year-old kids, going and buying guns. Now, in Washington State, we've closed the gun show loophole, but our neighboring states and states across the United States have not done the same. So that becomes a major issue. So if you want to buy a gun and you have a car that can drive, 2 hours down and 2 hours back, you can go get a shotgun from a gun show with no background check and really no questions asked. So that becomes a very difficult thing, or a false prophecy that we think we're safe. We think we're safe because we have legislation passed, but we're not. We have to look at how can we get the nation's gun laws to mirror back Washington State. So Washington State has decent gun laws, but if the other states do not mirror ours, then we're still in trouble. And we're really in the same place that we started, maybe with a little bit of deterrent. And on that same thing for myself, so when I was 16 years old, my brother and myself were both victims of gunshots. I got shot directly through my stomach and out my back from a guy who was around our same age, but with a handgun. Now, I would suspect that handgun probably came from a gun show. And if they didn't come directly from gun shows, they were sold after they left the gun show. Most of the guns in those in these neighborhoods are coming from gun shows. So I think this is a serious thing that we have to look at. We have to look at our neighboring states, and we got to see how can we make this movement move across the nation. If our representatives in Washington, D.C. don't take a stand or are too scared to step up to the plate, our local officials need to be contacting local officials of neighboring states and seeking personal relationships and spreading the awareness through that avenue. So thank you guys for having me, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for your
on.
comments, Clint. We appreciate that. Next up, Paul Tanner. Yes, sir. Nice to see you.
Again. I feel like I'm a minority here, but I'm going to speak proudly. I am an owner. I safely control my weapons because that's what I do, because it's not the law, but because it's what you're supposed to do if you own a gun or any other dangerous material. Hatchets, axes, knives, you name it. So one of my concerns is that as a community, as a society, we have desanctified life from conception to death because people now don't have a value for life. I have a value for life. I'm a survivor of childhood abuse. I spent 2 years in the military going to very dangerous places where people died from disease, from gunshots, from violence of all sorts. And I just, if we have many, many, many laws on the books, but we don't enforce them because we're afraid that, we'll be misconstrued as, we're too tough on somebody because of whatever population they are. If we don't enforce the laws become meaningless. So we should have a tough stance on enforce the laws that exist. And if we pass things like the assault weapons ban, which was nothing more than cosmetic, as was discussed earlier, it's a useless law. So therefore, we lose respect for the law. We lose respect for the law, we lose respect for life. We're all in danger from any person that wants to create evil. Timothy McVeigh, a right-wing person, used fertilizer to kill hundreds of people. I've seen overseas all kinds of devices used to create violence. Guns are not inherently violent. They are a piece of metal and plastic, nothing more, nothing less. It's the person behind it that's evil that chooses to take lives for the sake of taking lives and creating violence and fear. That is all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments, Paul. Back to the Vototron. Thank you, Jay. Okay, the Kirkland City Council should fund mental health services and suicide prevention programs in the schools and in the community. If you could vote on that for us, please. Okay, looks like we've all voted. Okay. Those are some strong numbers. Thank you very much. So we're going to turn to the topic of state and local legislation on firearm safety.
Okay, we're going to have 2 more speakers on each side of more gun regulations and less than the same gun regulations. So could the following people make their way to the microphone? Franz Giddings, Larry Kilbride, Rich Thomas, and Naveed Namate.
Yeah, please help me.
Okay.
Struggling. Okay, first up, Franz Giddings. Please start whenever you're ready.
When the mic's ready.
Nice to see you.
Yes.
Welcome.
I believe tonight we're talking about a public safety issue. I believe that this is not about people's freedom, because if we were talking about the freedom to carry with absolutely no restraint, then the freedom of each one of us to live a safe and non-fearful life would totally trump anybody else's freedom in a smaller population. But, people who want to look seriously at gun safety are not trying to take everybody's gun away. My boyfriend owns a gun, but he's a responsible gun owner. He has a locked safety box. He does practice enough so that he is sure that if he had to use it, he would be able to aim well. I have been in a situation where I depended on him having that little lock box with him, because we were going into a situation where the local sheriff would have been at least 45 minutes away. So I do believe that we have a lot to work with in terms of making sure everybody is safe, that people are trained. And by the way, that's what the NRA originally was for training people to use their guns safely. Please, NRA, get back to your mandate.
Thank you so much for your comments. And next we have Larry Kilbride. Larry? Welcome, Larry.
Madam Mayor, Council, folks. I believe that we have enough laws on the books that we should start with those laws first. We should understand how many gun crimes have been committed and what we've really done about it. If you give somebody 30 days jail with time off because they shot somebody, you're not doing the right thing and we're just wasting our time on it. People go in to purchase a firearm, get a background check, and you find out that they've been in jail for 30 years, you ought to be doing something more than just deny them the right to buy a gun. You ought to be taking them back to jail. That's all.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for your comments. Always count on Larry to tell it straight. Okay, next up, Rich Thomas. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Rich Thomas. I'm a Kirkland resident. I'm a former NRA member, a supporter of the Second Amendment, and a gun owner. And despite all that, I firmly believe we're long overdue to have some changes in our gun ownership laws. And I believe the NRA has too much influence in our election process. Regarding your 4 points, I think the 3 that I'm not talking about play a role, but they're feel-good words. But I think we really have to go after the legislation that is not supporting addressing gun violence. The point I believe will generate any action for citizen voters is legislation that puts our elected officials on notice that we're all watching who they vote for, what legislation they support, and where they get their campaign contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Next, we have Naveed Namadi.
Hi,
Welcome,
thank you
sir.
for having this open forum. I'm against further regulation of firearms or anything of that kind of nature. I think we have adequate gun laws on the books, and we just need to enforce them. At the state level, I'm actually a supporter of state preemption. One would call that funny, but the reason it's there is our local gun range is Wade's in Bellevue, and I go train there. If Bellevue has different gun laws than Kirkland, I may accidentally be tripped up in driving through that patchwork of gun laws. So if I have a pistol incorrectly stored that's legal in Kirkland, all of a sudden I get pulled over for something in Bellevue, and suddenly I'm facing felony charges. At the state level, we have one uniform code, and that's good statewide, and that's the way it should stay, because if someone's coming from let's say Linwood or Mount Vernon, and they just don't know, and they absentmindedly get tripped up on 50 different cities' gun laws, then suddenly a poor innocent citizen with no intent of breaking the law that day suddenly got embroiled. A family man gets charged with improperly carrying or storing or what have you. So I'm a firm believer in state preemption. Should the city be taxing firearms and ammunition? No, nothing more than a regular state sales tax. Anything more is just predatory towards someone trying to practice a right. And we shouldn't be looking at trying to regulate firearms that way. We mentioned it's both state and local level. If something wants to do, Eddie the Eagle Firearm Safety Program, I really like that. Stop, don't touch, leave the area, go tell an adult. In terms of that, I think that's where I stand. I'm an avid gun owner. I own multiple firearms. I am a life member of the National Rifle Association. Where you stand on their politics is one thing, but they do fight for what they believe in, and that's not moving forward with any stricter gun laws and enforcing the current laws on the books, whether you feel any different. So, I didn't see a light.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You guys have a great
Thank you
evening.
so much for your comments, Naveed. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to the Votatron, and then we're going to do some more comments. So the question is not this one. We already answered that. Oh, you're right. What was the outcome? I don't know. We're voting? Dave? I feel like this is not in my notes. Oh, here it is. It was there. Okay. Which one of these local policies or legislation options do you support the most? It's a lot of choices. You had time to think about that one? It is, yeah. We're ready? I think we're ready. Okay. Can you see that, council? Okay, thank you for giving us your feedback on that. Last Vototron question before we hear from our city council members, but I think we're going to hear from a couple more speakers. Okay. That's a pretty straightforward one. Okay, I think we're ready. Oh, you're not ready. I'm sorry. No. Yes. You want to talk about the school resource officers, Chief?
So we actually have at least one school resource officer here today. Officer Rob King is up here in the back, and he's actually assigned to the high school. And I saw Tyler Davidson earlier that's at Juanita, but I'm not sure if he's still here. But yes, they are fully commissioned police officers. They're not there just for protection. They're not just there because they carry a gun. They're also there because they're building relationships with students. We have programs they teach. They do a lot of intervention. It's not just about enforcement. And then they know the kids. So there are times when we've had actually students with medical crises that the officer had an idea of why they might be in a medical crisis and was able to share that information and actually save a life. So yes, they are fully commissioned police officers. Yes, we're armed. Keep it short.
Okay.
So this question, Heather, does not go to the mental health part. This is just the school resource officer part. Yes.
So I think if we had unlimited resources, we would all vote for more funding for everything.
Right.
And so I'd like to understand what trade-offs we're making with these questions.
So did you all hear that? If we had unlimited resources, of course we would want that, but what trade-offs would be involved if we were to pick this? What else would we miss out on? And that is a great question, and definitely something that the council will be wrestling with, and we'll be happy to talk to you probably. It's a more detailed question than we can take in a Vototron poll, but that's an excellent question. Okay, so we're going to
hear from some more people, and so could the following people make their way to the microphone. On the topic of improved enforcement of existing laws and regulations, Allison Perhar. In support of more stringent gun regulations, Priscilla Tomlinson. In support of less of the same gun regulations, James Barrick. In support of more, and let's start with those three. So I'm trying to keep this balanced. In support of more gun regulations, Kimberly Needy. And in support of less of the same gun regulations, Robert Mears.
Okay, whenever you're ready, Allison. Allison, are you here? Okay, I'll wait till Allison gets down and we'll go to Priscilla Tomlinson. Welcome.
Hi, I'm a mother of two daughters who attended LDUB, and now they're across the lake at UW. And when I hear about school shootings, it affects me very strongly. They did go through some lockdown situations when they were here at this school. I would like to see gun ownership more heavily regulated. If you want to have a gun, you should be trained, and you should be showing regularly that you are still capable of handling it properly. and that you can handle it in intense situations. I don't think it makes sense to just let anybody have a gun if they're not mentally stable, or if they don't really know how to use it, or if they're not storing it properly.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Now is Allison ready? Allison may have had to leave, but I'll call her again at the end.
Which category?
Allison is on.
Okay.
I'll wait for her. Okay, let's go to James Barrick. James, welcome.
So criminals, by definition, aren't going to follow more laws that they're determined to do what they do, and they're going to do so by any and all means, and that means more than just guns. So I think some of the strategies that could be employed are to urge that prosecutors are given the means and are urged to prosecute their cases rather than seek plea bargains. I think we should urge judges to sentence towards the upper limits of the sentencing guidelines. Maybe you can urge your state representatives to alter those sentencing guidelines. I think a lot of the suggestions here are targeting people who would obey the laws. You ask the taxes on guns and ammunition. I think any gun owner subject to those regulations would pay those taxes, but the people who are going to commit the crimes have stolen the guns or obtained them otherwise and would be less inclined to follow that kind of thing. And I apologize for being so disorganized.
No, you made your point. Thank you, James. Thank you very much for your comments. The next person is Kimberly Neal. Kimberly. No, Kimberly? Okay, let's go. I'll call these people again at the end. How about Robert Mears? Robert?
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. I feel our gun laws right now are adequate. We just need more enforcement of them. I read up on a lot of the new proposals through our last legislature session, and some of them are they sound good on paper, but in reality, they would not work very well. We were very upset when the Department of Licensing was leaking information to ICE, and with the current initiative that's going out there that is 30 pages big, they want to have the Department of License also control gun registration. And we have seen this in New York, where a paper gets a hold of this information and publishes it out to all the criminals.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. So let me try again for Kimberly or Allison, either? Okay.
Okay, so we have three more people that have signed up. Mark Moran, Chuck Dermody, and Anthony, last initial U.
Okay, Anthony, whenever you're ready. Welcome.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, everybody. I wanted to share a very quick anecdote, which has informed my view on firearms and, I guess, freedoms more generally. 2 years ago, I moved here to the great state of Washington with my wife to find a better job, find a better way of life, and we were so incredibly overwhelmed with joy when we got here and we found all that Washington has to offer. Some months into living here, we were woken one night by somebody trying to break into our house. It was a man who had taken a lot of methadone and thought it was his own home and wanted to get in very badly. At that time, I had never confronted a violent criminal before, and I really wasn't sure how to act, so I called the police, and they arrived moments later to apprehend the subject and put my mind at ease. Several days later, the criminal was released from jail on bond because the jail could not hold enough people, according to the district attorney. The very same day, I went to the store and I purchased an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle so that I could defend my family if this gentleman decided to come back and hurt my family that night. If some of you would get your way and have waiting periods on weapons or restrict the age at which an individual may own a so-called assault rifle, that would restrict that individual's ability to defend themselves. That wouldn't prevent that individual from acting irrationally, violently, and dangerously. So I have a message for everybody tonight who thinks that more gun laws are going to make us safer. Go ahead and try. Go ahead, I dare you. Challenge it. As the wonderful city attorney has pointed out, the right to self-defense is a natural right guaranteed by our Constitution and by our state laws. So anybody wishing to challenge that, go on and try. I welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for your comments. And next up, we have Chuck Dermody. Chuck?
Mayor,
Welcome,
thank
sir.
you for hosting this welcoming, balanced, and meeting here tonight. I appreciate it. Congratulations. My name is Chuck Dermody. I'm a responsible and law-abiding gun owner from Redmond. First thing, criminals are scofflaws. They scoff at gun laws. Example, a drug dealer and a burglar meet on the street. The drug dealer has cash and wants to buy a gun. Burglar has a gun to sell. The exchange is made and they walk away. Neither of them suggests doing a background check. They simply don't, because it doesn't make any sense to them. There's no such thing as a universal background check, never will be. Criminals break the law, it's what they do. Second thing, it's about people, not the tools that they choose. Violence was invented long before guns were. Once a person is determined to murder an identified individual or murder a number of people at random, they will do the deed. If a gun is not available, there are other tools. Drive a truck through a crowd. Build a truck bomb from readily available materials. The problem is the ideas in people's heads, not the guns. Same thing with suicides. Third thing, focus on the things we can change. We can make sure that we don't make the same mistakes in our school district that were made in Parkland. The Broward County School Board adopted a restorative justice program, which meant that the shooter's incidents of thefts, abuse, assault, and stalking were not reported to the police. There were many opportunities to stop this. If crimes are not punished, there will be more crimes. We need to take a close look at how restorative justice is implemented in our school district. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you for your comments. And then we have next Mark Moran. Mark?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, welcome.
I graduated from Lake Washington after moving here from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In my freshman year, I lettered off the rifle team in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm a life member of the NRA. I'm a 19-year member of the WCW that operates the Kenmore Ranges. I'm a member of the Washington Arms Collectors, and I have an FFL collector's license. Everybody here is concerned about gun safety. I just want to implore everybody to read the law before they vote for it. We got this initiative, 1639, and it reads, semi-automatic assault rifles are defined as any rifle which utilizes a portion of the energy of firing a cartridge to extract the fire cartridge case and chamber the next round, which requires a separate pull of the trigger for each cartridge. And that means any .22 automatic and any caliber. It's not just, it's defining assault weapons as any automatic weapon. And a .22 rifle can kill somebody, but it's not an assault rifle. You just need to read the law and know exactly what you're voting for before you do it. I compete at the Kenmore Ranges. It's a civilian marksmanship program by the government. I compete like 9 times out of the year. Some of those shoots, I use an M1 rifle, which is a semi-automatic rifle. It's just, this law will outlaw guns that are just utilized differently. There are like 3 million AR-15s, and there's very few of them used in crimes, and it's just it's a kind of an overreaction to ban all these rifles. I just read the law and make sure you know what you're voting for.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your comments. So we are down to our last card, and then our deputy mayor is going to give you some information that the city staff would like you to have. We're going to hear from our council members, and we're going to wish you a good night. It's been a great conversation. Next is Jeff Steiner. Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this on. This is a hugely important topic to me. So personally, I am in. owned a gun for most of my life. I actually was gifted a pellet gun when I was 6 years old, and I lived about 1.5 miles down the road from a gun range. I became very familiar with guns at a very young age, and I definitely appreciate my father for doing that and training me how to respect firearms. And one of the recurring issues that I see among people that I talk to that are vehemently against guns and so on and so forth it's usually a lack of education on what guns are and what they're capable of. And there's been a lot of stuff in the media lately that's kind of drives me nuts, and that is a lot of catchphrases like assault-style weapon or semi-automatic weapon or things like that, where it's, if you're uneducated, it may sound like a scary thing, and honestly, a lot of those are just constructed by the media to be a catchphrase and to get you on these focus points. And anyway, what I mean to say is I definitely just think that a lot of people need to become familiar with a lot of the styles of weapons that are out there, and to not just ban an entire category outright because it sounds like a scary thing. I just am very much in favor of more education on what guns actually are and what they're capable of, and I definitely think that that would fix a lot of things just off the offset. So,
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thanks for your comments. Okay, here's our deputy mayor.
To the question that somebody had about how do we balance all these priorities and how can you provide input, given some context, the city staff has reminded me that we're going to be doing a number. Yeah?
End of our cards, and we were at the end. So yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this chance. I appreciate your desire to have balanced perspectives here tonight. And I just wanted to address the idea that gun laws don't matter. The fact of the matter is gun laws do matter. Gun laws make a difference. In 1995, the state of Connecticut passed laws asking for enhanced background checks and safety training for firearms purchase. And after those laws were passed, suicide rates by firearm dropped by more than 15%. The state of Missouri repealed those very same laws, and suicide rates went up by 16%. So I just want to really point out that these laws make a difference, right? We've heard tonight, beautifully said, that suicide is actually sort of the biggest issue that we have in the state of Washington in terms of gun violence, and laws make a difference in terms of the suicide rate, right? Safely storing firearms makes a difference in terms of especially young people who might get access to firearms who are contemplating suicide. So gun laws really do make a difference, and the studies have shown that. So I just wanted to highlight that we can actually affect change through our legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got one more.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jan Young, and I'm with Kirkland Safe. I just wanted to reiterate what Sarah just said about gun laws. And there's an analysis by the Giffords Law Center to prevent gun violence show that, with few exceptions, states with the strictest gun control measures, including California, Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York, have the lowest rates of gun deaths, while those with the most lax laws, like Alabama, Alaska, and Louisiana, have the highest. Washington state's in between. So I asked the City Council to look at those states that have stricter gun laws. Connecticut significantly expanded an existing ban on the sale of assault weapons, prohibit the sale of magazines with more than 10 rounds, and require the registration of existing assault rifles and higher capacity magazines. The state also requires background checks for all firearm sales and created a registry of weapons offenders, including those accused of illegally possessing a firearm. Also, we need to remember to support our neighboring cities as well as law enforcement in order to successfully move our gun safety measures forward.
Okay, I am sorry about this. I hate to do this, but we are going to have to cut the comments short now because we are at past 7:30 in our program. You can call, write, email, text, send us a carrier pigeon. We really care. We really want to hear your comments. But I also need to hear from the council, and Jay has some information that I think it's important for you to hear tonight.
Okay. On the budget discussion, if folks go to the kirklandlaw.gov website, there's a link to the budget process. And we're going to be having a number of sessions through the summer at different community meetings where you can weigh in and help us with some input on how we balance those priorities. We've developed a budget game to make it very easy for you to weigh in and make some of those prioritization decisions. So if you go to the website and look at the budget links there, that'll give some more information on upcoming opportunities. We're also going to be talking to the community about some potential ballot measures, and there's some information in your packet in this sheet for you to take a look at some of the things the council will be talking about and making a decision on this summer.
So your city council's been very patiently quiet over here, and you know for politicians that's not easy. So we just want to give them a couple of minutes each if they want to make a couple of comments, because I know that they care deeply about this topic also.
Sure. Well, first I want to thank everyone for all of your comments. I've been collecting different ideas for the last few months. I got a list of my own that's over 24 points already, and I picked up a few more tonight, so I appreciate that. I did want to mention a few of the things on my list that I didn't hear tonight. At the federal level, I would like to ask the federal government to catch up on the backlog on the instant background check database. And that will take funding, but it makes no sense to have instant background checks if all the data isn't in the database. And second, we need to increase penalties for knowingly providing firearms to persons who have had their guns taken away. And I'm thinking in particular about the Waffle House shooting in Tennessee, where the shooter's father knew his guns had been taken away but gave them back to him anyway. At the state level, we have an existing reckless endangerment law, which has in the past been used to prosecute people who leave their guns out and their kids get a hold of them, or those kind of things. The problem with the law is it doesn't explicitly mention that unsafe storage of firearms is an element of the crime, right? That you can be prosecuted for that, so maybe people aren't aware of it. So if 1639 doesn't pass, we should at least make unsafe storage of firearms explicit in the reckless endangerment law. A couple things at the local level. The city attorney mentioned the fact that cities already have authority to declare parts of the city to be no shooting zones. I can't think of a single place in Kirkland where it's safe to shoot a gun. And I would declare the entire city to be a no shooting zone. Now, of course, if you're in a gun range, that's fine. If you're shooting in self-defense, that's fine. But we shouldn't have people target shooting or hunting in our parks, even the big ones. And then finally, I think that the city could do more to help facilitate people who have a gun that they don't want anymore, that they want to dispose of. We don't want them just selling it at a garage sale or on Craigslist. So I'd like to see a way where our police department perhaps could collect firearms, or at least advise people on the proper way to sell them through a licensed dealer. Now, it might be a little risky to walk into the police station with a gun, but I'm sure that we can work it out, right, Chief?
We'll
okay. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Dave Asher. To those that think that we have all the laws and regulations that we need, the time has come to improve what we're doing. The nation, not just Kirkland, the nation is at a point that I think we finally come to a realization that we can do better than what we're doing right now. What exactly the precise things are will take a lot of sifting, a lot of talking, and it will take some action, not just by the City Council, but also by the state, and hopefully at the federal level. We'll do something, in my estimation, in the next year, and I would expect sooner rather than later. So providing your input and providing your advice is welcome. We're not that far away, so please engage with us, and let's hear the good ideas. Don't be silent if you think that things are too lax or that suggestions are getting too strict. Stay in the conversation. That is really the important part right now.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming again. I really found what you all had to say very interesting, and I was taking notes as best I could as I was listening. I see this as a discussion that we're starting and that we will continue. So this isn't the end by any means. I find it very important, and I want you all to know that public safety is our number one priority as a council and as a city. Almost 2/3 of our resources, our budget, goes towards fire and police services. So I'm here tonight really to listen, and what I was listening for was, one, to understand what we can do. We talk about laws, we talk about funding, we talk about change in policies at the city, about improved education, about increased awareness. Those are things that I was listening for. The other thing was how we can best invest our resources. So there was a comment earlier about we have limited resources, and that is indeed correct. So where should we spend the resources we do have? And if we need more, what should we ask for? And then I was interested in some common themes. What was supported through some of those questions I found interesting. Couple questions that I particularly was focused on was around mental health services and suicide prevention. 74% strongly agreed or agreed with looking at that with additional resources. The other one was school resource officers. And I do want to thank the Lake Washington School District for stepping up and funding half of the resource officers so that we could have officers in middle schools. That's a big commitment by the school district, and I did see one of our school board members here earlier, Sherri. Was she still here? Yeah, she's the school board president, so thank you to the board, the school board. I was also interested in just learning about what legislative action we can take. I was actually this morning, I was meeting with one of our state senators, and I found it interesting that she told me, she's like, Kirkland, you are so effective at communicating your needs and how I, as your legislator, can help you. She actually suggested that we should train other agencies on how to be this effective. So I thought that was... So I just want to thank you again, and just want you to make to know that I'm committed in community safety and gun safety. Thank you.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I neglected to say that our state representative, Larry Springer, was here as well. So he was here all evening listening. He went home to feed the dogs, but he has been here right up until I came to introduce him.
Hi, I'm Tom Neir, and I'm not going to take much more of your time. I agree with what my fellow council members have said. I want to thank you guys for being here. I've sat, I've listened, and I know that we are going to act I think that the gun violence and carnage has reached a point where we need to try to move the ball in maybe a different direction. The ideas that you shared tonight, some of them novel, some of them we've heard over and over again. And I think we're going to be facing a very difficult time in the next 3-4 months, coming together to try to pick what we think we would like to do to try to make a difference. So I reiterate, please stay involved. We're involved, and we need to get to a good spot in the next 3-4 months. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Penny Sweet. I'm married to the dog lover who was here to listen. Thank you all for coming tonight. This is exciting to me. I've been advocating for town hall meetings like this for a number of years, and to have one on such a significant topic, I think, is a great way to sort of break the ice. This conversation is about gun responsibility, and some of the elements of gun responsibility, regardless of weight. I mean, one of the things I have to say to you gun owners and advocates who are here tonight, thank you. I really appreciate the fact that you've got a strong story to tell. I wish that all gun owners did. I don't think all gun owners do. Responsible gun ownership to me will be aided by training, by background checks, by age restrictions. Regardless of how many good gun owners there are out there advocating for training, advocating for various elements of safe gun use, somehow babies still get hold of guns and kill each other. Somehow distressed teens and distressed adults find guns and take their own lives. Somehow we continue to live in an environment where we have to train our school children defensive techniques just in case someone comes in to shoot them. This is not acceptable. We have to keep this conversation going, both sides, to figure out how we're going to fix this bad, bad situation. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here tonight. As I'm thinking of the words here, I've been really struggling with my metaphors and having the spirit of the balanced discussion we have, because there's no silver bullet that we can do. Okay. And even when I say there's no single solution, which is what you're trying to get at the metaphor, you want to say that there's multiple things we want to do, and I've heard that described as a silver buckshot solution, and so we're still struggling with that. But I do think we're talking about things that are going to be multi-layered. We're going to be talking about the budget and the investments that we make here in the city. We're going to be talking about the policies that we have for public safety and within the police department. We're going to be talking about how we make it easier within the protection framework we have, like the suggestion we have to get the support and help and the protection orders for the people that need it. And we've heard some good ideas here tonight that I think we're going to take forward with this. I do think that there are some, in addition to what we do as a city today, I think there are going to be some things that we ask you as voters about. We may be looking at accelerating those investments in addition to what we do with the budget process. Talking about how we do more school resource officers, talking about how we provide resources for more proactive policing, talking about how we can provide more staffing for community response, EMTs, mental health, and those things, talking about how we can provide more funding for responsible gun ownership and training so that everybody has the opportunities to be as responsible as some of the people that have talked today. Beyond that, I think there are some things that we can come together in advocacy to the legislature on giving us as a city the authority to do some of the things that we'd like to talk about. And we heard some suggestions about city parks as an example. There are other topics that we may not be able to come together, and I would encourage everybody to at least continue the conversation, and we'll perhaps see each other down in Olympia talking to our state legislators. So in closing, thank you all for being involved, and thank you for continuing the conversation, because I think this is really just a starting point, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done here today.
I can hardly follow that. And I know you've heard from me all night, but I do want to tell you a couple of things. One is that I grew up in a hunting and fishing family, and I know how to prepare a brace of ducks. I know how to prepare an elk liver. You might not think it's delicious, but I know how to do all those things because we did that when I was a kid. That's how I grew up. I know how to skeet shoot. I'm really good at it. I have had a concealed pistol permit before. I lived by myself on 30 acres for 10 years, and I had my dad's shotgun, and I felt like I needed to take care of myself. I do think I'm educated about guns, and I still feel like it is time for us to do something. And I want you to know as well that this is not a done deal. I think a lot of the time people feel like, oh, they're just bringing people in. It's a feel-good exercise. They've already made up their minds. I don't think we have. I haven't. I really want us to do something, though, because our community's asked us to. And this is what I love about Kirkland, is that when you ask us to do something, your government tries to respond. So we pride ourselves on being a decisive and responsive government. My personal view is we need to do something. And always our laws are not for law-abiding people who are doing a great job of being responsible, right? They're for bad actors, they're for problems, they're for the things that go wrong. And I really believe that we can do a better job of fixing the things that go wrong. And that's why we wanted to have this conversation. We're not going to try to do anything drastic. We can't in the city, but I think we can do a little bit. And we can also show a little bit of leadership in our state and in our country. And I think we've done that tonight, and I thank you all very much for your participation. I thank our staff, our police department, our city attorney, our chief, our city manager, all of you. Thanks so much, and have a good evening.